Hello and welcome to an Everyday Canines video. In this series of videos we're looking at firework phobia in dogs and how we can help them through that, especially during the busy fireworks season. In this episode we're going to be discussing the reasons behind firework fear in dogs and what that tells us about how we can help our dogs. So the thing to understand with firework phobia is it's a complicated thing. It's not any one factor. There's lots of factors that interplay to cause a dog to be worried about loud noises and fireworks in particular. We can't just say, for instance, that, it's because they're a border collie, so i.e. they're going to be more noise sensitive, because that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because there can be border collies that aren't worried by fireworks. In the same sense that we can have a working lines Labrador, and obviously Labradors are bred to work in the field with bangs going off, and we can have a noise sensitive Labrador that doesn't like fireworks. So it's not just one factor, it's lots of factors that interplay and that then build up into this big picture of why our dog's nervous about fireworks. So let's look at the biggest factor that we might have in our dogs, and it's the one that they're all going to have to a certain degree. And that is that in terms of evolution, in terms of survival, it makes sense to be reactive to loud noises. If you think to yourself in a survival situation, if you're in the wild, if you're a wild animal, there's a loud bang. You don't know what it is, so you just run in the opposite direction. It makes sense because even if it turns out it wasn't a threat, you are stacking the odds in your favour of survival. So it makes better sense to run away from any noise that's loud than to stand around and go, wonder what that was. Now, we can be the same as people. Most of us, if we hear a loud noise suddenly on a quiet day, we'll go, what was that? But because obviously we are human beings, we can then rationalise that and say, was a car backfiring, or it was this. And then again, we might say, I don't know what that noise was, I'm going to investigate it. But because dogs don't have that sense of reasoning, they can't do that. So for some dogs, the only reaction they've got is to panic, to run away, or to hide. So Daniel Mills, who's a professor of veterinary behavioural medicine at the University of Lincoln, he says this about this particular aspect of dogs. He says, from a biological perspective, it pays to err on the side of running away even when it's not necessary. So why does my dog have a tendency to be anxious? Well, that's a normal trait. And that's a big thing to understand. It's more normal for your dog to be worried by loud noises than for your dog to lay out flat calm and go, that was a bad noise, doesn't bother me, doesn't matter to me. It's much more normal from an evolutionary perspective to be worried by loud noises. Okay, so we've looked at that first factor, that it's natural for our dogs to be reactive to noises. How they react to a loud noise is another aspect, another thing, and depends on circumstances and their genetics. So the next thing we need to look at is that dog's early life conditioning. What happened to that dog in the vital socialisation period, which is usually up to about 12 weeks, that could potentially lead them to be more worried about fireworks, more reactive to fireworks, than a dog that was of the same temperament but didn't have those experiences. So this is obviously very hard. If you've got a rescue dog, you might have no idea what they went through when they were younger. You might have taken on an old dog, and of course you might not have had your puppy till it was later older. And even if you've had your puppies from 8 weeks, it is possible for something to have happened which you didn't know about, which could then lead to this fear. So an example is you've gone out, you've left your puppy at home, safe and secure, perhaps in a crate, and while you're out there was fireworks or any sort of big loud noise that really scared the puppy, and the puppy was all on its own, it panicked, it got scared, and there was nothing to comfort it or to make it feel better, and that then imprints on the puppy's brain as a loud noise equals I'm on my own, I'm scared, I'm frightened, and it builds up this fear pattern in their head. It's a difficult thing to overcome because you can't necessarily be with your puppy 24/7. We all have to go out sometimes and leave our puppies, and of course something could happen during that period. Naomi Harvey, who's the research manager in canine behaviour at Dogs Trust, she explains it this way. She says, puppies have this period when their brain learns what is normal in the world, what is okay, and what I should not be afraid of. And then after 12 weeks of age, they start to develop their fear response. So if they encounter something new after 3 months of age and it frightens them, they can learn to be afraid of that going forward. So we've got these two elements playing into each other. You've got that socialization period where you can take your dog around and try and introduce them to new loud sounds and different experiences and hope that that will help encourage them to be confident around loud noises. And then you've got this period that comes after 12 weeks where your dog becomes, they develop, say, a fear response. They go for a fear period, some people call it. And so when things happen during that period, if you're not there to help make that situation better, to smooth over what's happened, say, so there was a loud noise, but you gave your dog treats and you comforted it and the dog went, oh, that isn't so bad. If that happens, then because you've got this factor in your dog that they're developing this fear, which you can do nothing about, and you may never even know it happened. So you might be saying, well, I don't know why my dog is afraid of fireworks. You know, I when he was younger, I took him out to these places and let him hear loud noises, etc., etc. But you just don't know. So there's this element of uncertainty, and also it could be a thing that your dog had a reaction to something that frightened it, and you were there, but your reaction impacted upon how they reacted. And we'll get to that in a minute. So the next thing we need to think about is our dog's temperament, because our dog's temperament will again influence how they're going to react to fireworks. Now, you could have a dog that is naturally prone to being noise sensitive and slightly anxious, but because there's been some good socialization, you've managed to protect them from being exposed to loud noises when they're on their own or a dangerous situation, then you could override so that when they do hear a big bang, they're not as reactive to it as, say, the same dog with the same temperament that was placed in a situation as puppy, where it heard lots of loud noises when it was young and it didn't have anybody to comfort it or whatever, or got very scared or ran away or whatever. So it's going to be more reactive. So these play a factor, that temperament will play a factor. Temperament is, of course, can be dependent on breed, but within breeds, as we know, there are different temperaments within breeds. You can have a really calm, laid-back Labrador, and you can have a highly strung Labrador. And in all breeds, there is these different extremes and levels. Temperament is based heavily on epigenetics, which is how the dog's genes are influenced by external factors in the environment. And they play a significant role in how our dogs are predisposed to suffering from stress and anxiety and fear. We know from studies in humans and animals that during pregnancy, how the mother is in terms of her stress level, how calm she is, how happy she is, if there's any major incidents occurring with her which causes her to anxiety, that will affect the offspring in terms of their temperament. So if during pregnancy a mother is exposed to a high stress situation over a prolonged time, not necessarily one-off, that causes a lot of anxiety, this is going to release cortisol into the body, and this is going to affect the fetus, and this is going to produce puppies or babies that are more prone to being anxious than, say, a mother who was not exposed to any of that, who had quite an easy lifestyle during pregnancy. It was very relaxed, and everything is fine. So this definitely influence, and that the high cortisol levels definitely can have a negative impact on the developing offspring. So if we've got a situation where the bitch, the mother dog, was exposed to stresses during her pregnancy, and these could be different forms of stress. It doesn't necessarily mean that she was frightened by something. It could be stresses in terms of a lack of food, or perhaps she was out on the street, so she wasn't, in a safe environment when she was pregnant, or something else along those lines. Even it could be stresses around the pregnancy, so she could have difficulties with the pregnancy. Anything like that could then influence her puppies to be more prone to anxiety, stress and fear than if they had not occurred. So again, that's a factor that you can't necessarily control. You might have a rescue dog, or even if you're the breeder of the dog, you might not be able to control the fact that something happened during the pregnancy that stressed the dog. It could have been something wrong with the pregnancy that the dogs and puppies survived, but it still played that stress factor upon them. It could even be that the mother was exposed to fireworks and that caused her to be stressed, or any other loud noises, thunderstorms during pregnancy. That's not, again, another situation that can control. And so that's another factor we need to take into account when we're asking ourselves, why is my dog fearful of fireworks? But we also have this extra element that has been found in scientific studies, which shows that even dogs that are not temperamentally inclined towards being fearful and anxious can be noise sensitive to fireworks. So you could have a chilled out dog the rest of the year, but the fireworks go off and they are afraid and worried about them. And you say to yourself, well, my dog's not normally like that. What is it? And the science that's coming together in the research is showing that it's based on a huge amount of interplaying factors. It's based on breed, age, the sex of the dog, reproductive status is a big one. So there's not staying at this moment in time whether it's better to have, whether dogs that are not neutered or spayed are less fearful. I'm not saying that. It might be the other way. But there's this factor that they have noticed that reproductive status, whether spayed or neutered, can make a difference. It's also the length of time with the owner. So you could have had a dog that you've only had a couple of weeks before fireworks went off. They haven't had that time to build up the bond with the owner, the trust. So again, there's that factor to play into it. One thing they've discovered is dogs that live with the owner who bred them, so the breeders kept their own puppy, are less inclined to have fear problems compared to those who've gone to a second owner. So this is another factor to play. And it's probably, most of us are second owners. Most of us didn't breed our own dog, but it's something to bear in mind that there's just that break, that anxiety of taking the puppy away from the situation it knows, and it has to then get used to other people and a new environment. That could have an influence on how our dog reacts long term to fearful and frightening situations. And then we've got another factor that comes into play, and this is why fear of fireworks is so complicated. And it's why when you get these pseudo-behaviourists coming on to YouTube or Facebook and saying to you, oh, well, you've made your dog fearful of fireworks and it's all your fault because you didn't do X, Y, Z. That is just an oversimplification of the whole thing, because there's so many different elements to this fear. We can't say it's just because you didn't socialise. We can't say it's just because of that. And one of the other factors which we have no control over is that as our dogs age, it has been shown that they are prone to getting more fearful, more reactive. This is especially true with noises, because as the dog ages, they start to lose their hearing, they start to go deaf, and they lose the ability to locate certain higher pitch frequencies. What this means is they are less able to hear and detect where a noise is coming from, and that worries some dogs. Not all dogs will worry about that, but some dogs. So they hear a bang, they can't tell where it came from, and that panics them more because they don't know where to run away from, to escape it, if you like, if you see what I mean. Again, going back to Daniel Mills, he says, hearing the noise and not knowing where it's coming from is probably much scarier for a dog, and this is why fireworks are much scarier for a dog. You can watch a fireworks display and know that it's not going to hit your balcony. But if you're a dog, all you know is there's a bang there, and I don't know when the next bang is going to happen. And that, of course, is another huge element, is unpredictability. I may have been made jump by loud noises, fireworks. You're sitting there, you're quiet, perhaps just like you're dozing off in the evening, and the bang goes off and you go, oh, what was that? Again, it's the unpredictability. If we were to know when the fireworks were going off, we could really prime our dogs for it and help them. And they would be easier if they knew that, fireworks went off on the 5th of November between 7 and 9, that would be something we could work with. But we don't know we can have fireworks going off any day of the week during the winter season, usually. Any time in the evening. I've had fireworks around here going off at 2 a.m. Well, I'm in bed, as most of us are, at 2 a.m. I can't predict that's going to happen, and I usually wake up with a loud, "Whoa, what was that?" And because the dog's set off. So there's so many elements playing into this. And it creates this problem for us, because we've got to say to ourselves, well, how do I start to pick this apart? How can I help my dog? And there are ways to help your dog. But the first thing you need to understand and appreciate is why your dog is like this. And not only that they can't help it, because of their, it's lots of temperament, genetics, experience, but also it's not necessarily the case that you can help the fact that they are like that. I don't want you to sit there and feel bad that your dog is scared of fireworks and feel like you're a failure as an owner. Because there's lots of us out there who've got dogs that we've raised from 8 weeks old, who've done all the things that we should have done with, socialisation, etc., and tried our best, and we have a dog that's scared of fireworks. And, you say to yourself, well, what did I do wrong? How come I've got my other dogs are okay, but this one isn't? And that's why we need to look at it deeper and say to ourselves, well, there's all these different factors going on. There's these genetics, there's this, there's that. It's not one thing that failed. It's all these different elements. And it can come down to breed at the end of the day. It can come down to what your dog has experienced in the past, their temperament. It's all so many factors. Once we appreciate that, the next step is to say, right, how am I going to cope with this and solve this problem? So in the next episode of this series, we're going to be looking at what we can do in the run-up towards fireworks season to help our dogs cope with those loud bangs. This has been an Everyday Canines video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, you might like to check us out on YouTube, and we're also on Instagram and Facebook, and I hope to see you all again very, very soon.